Well, fellas, great to have you here. Let's start things off with President Trump. This third campaign for the White House is getting little to no media attention. Plus, it seems that outside of his hardcore base, Republicans are waiting to see who else jumps in before they really throw support behind any one candidate. And with establishment types like McConnell and others, it seemed like his ability to obtain the GOP nomination in 2024 is less than certain now than it was in 2016, given the 2020 election. With that all said, should Donald Trump continue and try to win Republican voters over, or should he go rogue and run as an independent, potentially becoming a spoiler? I remember Ross Perot when I was a kid. That was fun. But I mean, this could split the ticket and just ensure Joe Biden remains in office. Brian, what do you think?
Well, I mean, I think it all comes down to a question of Trump's ego and what he's trying to achieve, in my opinion, right? I think at this point in time, we looked at what happened with the midterm elections. His candidates, well, some of them got into office in very, very, very strongly Republican areas, basically a shoo-in type of deal. Where it was a little bit more debatable, where independents were involved, where there wasn't such a stronghold, his candidates did not fare well. So from a GOP perspective, you go, okay, we don't necessarily want him in there. And as you said, if he's going to run independent, let's say he does. Let's say his ego demands it because DeSantis gets the nod. What's he going to accomplish? I don't even think he's going to pull as much as Ross Perot. Because when you look at the GOP perspective, right, people were in a battle for the soul of the nation is what many people believe. I tend to believe that as well. Can you risk throwing some votes behind a Donald Trump who you know really has no legitimate chance of winning? Independents don't necessarily like him. You're not going to get any Democrats. And if there's one thing that can galvanize people against, a GOP third candidate, it's going to be Donald Trump. So there's really no upside here. And for Donald Trump, who we know is very egotistical, to run, he would have to, number one, concede that he has been defeated in the GOP primaries, that he is not the guy. And he would have to eat a lot of crow knowing that he has no legitimate shot at winning as a third party candidate. And I don't think he's willing to do that.
I think one criteria to run as an independent candidate is to hear that giant sucking sounds that Ross Perot always used to talk about. You hear that? The giant sucking sound. As Bill Clinton and George Bush look at him and like, I don't hear anything. But, there's a myth that I think has kind of been busted the past 10 years. It's this myth of the swing voting independent. In the Midwest, you have something we call the Obama-Trump voter. It's somebody that voted for Obama in 2008, may or may not have voted for him in 2012, and then went full-on Trump in 2016. That Obama-Trump voter got deluged with 4 years of rapid media attacks. Everyone in the entertainment industry, everyone in academia telling them that the world was coming to an end if Donald Trump had been reelected in 2020, and they reluctantly voted for Biden because they thought, maybe if we get rid of Trump, we might not like what's going to happen, but at least things will return to normal. And normal is pretty subjective these days. But, in Virginia, which, would have been considered a bellwether state for many years, that was busted also in 2014 when you had a Libertarian candidate on the ballot, Rob Sarvis, who was running for Senate at the time. And what you basically saw was that in terms of Libertarian votes specifically, we're just talking people who identify as that. Those folks, if there was no Libertarian on the ballot, they were not going to show up. And the Republicans had to concede this looking at the next couple elections that they lost. They lost it again with Ed Gillespie, who tried running for governor in 2018. They lost it again in the following year with Corey Stewart, who tried running for Senate. There were no third-party candidates running in those races. I think there may have been one against Ed Gillespie, but, I mean, he got less than 1%. Nobody really paid attention to him, unlike Rob Sarvis in 2014, 2013. Mm-hmm. So what did that tell people? One, if there's no Libertarian on the ballot, they don't show up. They just don't vote. They may vote, but by and large, they don't show up. And then in terms of these independents, if you really break it down, depending by state, these people that call themselves independents, if you look at their voting history, they almost always vote for one party. When we look at Virginia, when we look at Maryland, they're almost always voting Democrat. And I think if 2020 showed us one thing, it's that when the chips are down and people are actually convinced that we're in an Avengers Endgame level threat, they will absolutely throw all their criticisms aside and vote for who's going to give them the most comfort. So, if Trump decides to run third party, I completely agree with Brian. that's him giving up. That's him basically saying there's no way this is going to happen, so I might as well do it completely my way. But I mean, he's the Dwayne the Rock Johnson of politics. He will get Black Adam into theaters no matter what. Donald Trump will make himself the nominee no matter what. People are saying this is harder now than it was in 2016. I tend to think that's a little bit of a historical revisionism, because I remember when he announced, the New York Post went ahead and had it. They didn't even have him on the front page the day he announced. They put him in like the humor section or something. They weren't paying attention to him. So yeah, I mean, I don't think Trump runs third party. I don't think a third party candidate really is going to get in the way of things, because amidst like, $20 eggs and bacon, like people are going to just do what they always do. They're going to fall in line. It's the end of the world once again. I don't think he runs third party. I don't think third party candidates really play much in 2024.